everybody. Welcome back to Trigger Warning. This is
guys,
Bev.
and this is Diz.
And we have a case today that's kind of a downer. So just wanted to come in a little on the lower end here and kind of get you prepared a little differently. I'm going to start with trigger warnings. We're not going to do our usual upswing on this one. Trigger warnings for today, murder of a child, the rape and sexual assault of a child neglect, and drug use.
Oh my gosh, what's not in this one?
Yeah, it's a really bad one. So if you can't handle it, I completely understand, and maybe you can skip to next week and maybe skip this one because it's kind of hard. I don't go into a lot of detail, and when it comes to description of, like, when we come to the autopsy findings and that kind of thing, I will warn you and let you know so you can skip over that part. But I just wanted to give you that opening a little bit. So
okay, wow.
Yeah, so welcome to Trigger Warning.
Yes, guys, welcome back.
So I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're not even going to do our little pause.
No, we're not going to spiel or anything.
No spiels. So, Rowan Damia Ford was born April 11th, 1998. In November of 2007, Rowan was 9 years old and was in 4th grade, living in Stella, Missouri. Stella is a small town with a population of around 200 at the time.
Oh, wow, that is small.
Tiny town. Rowan lived with her 44-year-old mom at the time, Colleen Ford, and her 25-year-old stepfather, David Spears, in their home, which was described as ramshackle, quote unquote, in the sources that I read.
Okay.
So along with this ramshackle home, Rowan would sometimes go to school in the winter without socks. She had her shoes on, but no socks.
Oh my gosh.
Reports also said that her hair was often matted and sometimes infested with lice.
Oh my gosh.
Despite these hardships, though, Rowan was a happy kid. She had a Barbie pink bedroom. She loved Barbie. And she had a purple bike, which she rode to church. She liked church so much that she would actually go early to help the pastor set up. She also arrived early to school, and she was considered a star student. Her 4th grade teacher, Todd Holt, said of Rowan, quote, "She's the kind of kid I think that every school teacher could want. I mean, she showed up at school and it was all about work. It was all about what Rowan was going to do to be able to get ahead in life," unquote.
Aww.
Unfortunately, she would not get the chance. So we're going to start our story on November 3rd, 2007. So the night before, on Friday, November 2nd, Rowan was actually left in the care of her stepfather, David Spears, since her mother was working an overnight shift at Walmart. Rowan's normal routine was to run out to the driveway to greet her mother when she got home from work. She would come out and greet her, smiling, ask her how her shift had been. So on November 3rd, that was a Saturday, so when Colleen got home at 9 a.m., she expected Rowan to come out and meet her. But Rowan didn't bounce outside to meet her like she normally did. So Colleen figured that her daughter, who was usually an early riser, probably got caught up in a book. She loved to read.
Aww.
So she went inside, but Rowan was not in her room. She looked around the house. She couldn't find her anywhere. So her husband David was asleep on the couch, and Colleen woke him and was like, "Where's Rowan?" And he was like, oh, she's at a friend's house. But he couldn't tell her which friend. So Colleen was worried. She wanted to call the police. But he said, no, she's at a friend's house. He just couldn't tell her which friend it was. So she waited. Hours passed. She kept waiting, hoping the phone would ring, saying, "Hey, can you come pick up Rowan?"
Right.
Or having it be Rowan and being like, "Hey, I'm ready to come home."
Yeah.
She even searched around the neighborhood, just nearby, like, is she playing at this person's house? Is she at the playground nearby? Is she here? Is she there? Couldn't find her. Eventually, enough was enough. At 6:50 p.m. on November 3rd, Rowan was officially reported as missing, and an Amber Alert went out. So as everybody knows, an Amber Alert means all hands on deck.
Right.
A child's missing. Time is everything. So the small community of Stella came out in droves and began searching for Rowan. The first thing when an investigation starts, the first step is usually to find out where the missing person was last seen and who they were with. So since her stepfather had been home with her the night before, they needed to know everything about what had happened that previous night. So David Spears had friends over the night before, Nathan Mahurin and Chris Collings. Colleen had left around 8:30 p.m. for her overnight shift, and David and his friends hung out and drank while Rowan played in her room. Chris Collings, who was 32 years old, had actually lived with the family during the summer and fall of 2007. He had moved out in late October, which was like maybe 2 to 3 weeks before this happened.
Okay.
And was now staying in a travel trailer on his family's property in the nearby town of Wheaton.
Okay.
So eventually, Chris asked Nathan to drive him home that night, and Nathan agreed. David decided to go with them, which means he left 9-year-old Rowan home alone. So before he left with his friends, David said he went to check on her, and she had actually fallen asleep on her bedroom floor, I guess playing with whatever.
Barbies, probably.
Kids, yeah. Kids are kids. They'll
sure.
They'll check out. They'll fall asleep on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
So when he got back, he said it was around 12 a.m., but he told investigators he didn't check on her again when he got back. Around 1:30 a.m., David called his mom and asked to borrow her vehicle. His mom agreed, brought her SUV over. She said she watched TV while he was gone, and she never bothered to check on Rowan.
Oh. Mm.
Investigators were frustrated. David wasn't being completely cooperative. He wouldn't tell them where he'd gone that night and why he'd been gone for hours, but he did admit that he was wrong to leave Rowan alone. You think so? He explained that he hadn't told them about leaving her alone because he was worried that they would think he was involved somehow if he told them that he'd left her by herself.
Oh my gosh.
Newton County Sheriff Chris Jennings said that they thought it was very strange that he also didn't report Rowan missing for 8 to 10 hours. Because he got home, he never checked on her again. And then when her mom got home the next morning, he's like, oh, she's at a friend's house. It's like, well, then how do you know that? You never checked on her. And he also said that David had changed his story several times and he'd been caught in a few lies. So investigators needed to speak with David's friends, too, since they were also there that night. So first they spoke with Nathan. Nathan said that the three men had met up after their shift at the farm where they'd all been working. They'd gone to the liquor store, and then they went to David's to drink and shoot pool. Nathan confirmed that a little while after Colleen left for work, Chris asked for the ride home, and Nathan agreed to take him. They convinced David to go with them, which meant leaving Rowan home alone. Nathan offered up additional information that David had left out. On the way to Chris's house, they stopped and got more alcohol. When they got to Chris's trailer, they continued to drink and they smoked a lot of weed. They're very responsible adults.
They're so responsible, yeah.
And I didn't read anywhere, but I doubt that David mentioned the weed part either.
Oh, I'm sure he didn't.
About an hour later, David asked Nathan to drive him back to his house. So Nathan took David home, dropped him off around midnight. So the timeline on that was consistent with what David had said.
Right, yeah.
But investigators, of course, still want to know why a little over an hour later, David then asked his mom to borrow her car.
Yeah. And then leaves.
So, November 4th, Sunday. The investigators need to talk to the third guy. So, on Sunday the 4th, they speak to Christopher Collings. He basically verified Nathan's story, but he left out the part about smoking pot. So, after David and Nathan left, he told them that he went back inside and went to bed. And he said he was surprised when they showed up because he said he hadn't even spoken to David since that night and didn't know that Rowan was missing until the police showed up to speak with him. So later that evening, he actually went over to visit Colleen, Rowan's mom, to see how the search was going and offered to help look for Rowan.
Okay.
On November 5th, that Monday, the FBI joined the case. Searches continued. Dozens of officers from 3 counties, 50 specialists, the Missouri State Highway Patrol, and now the FBI were looking. Deputies continued speaking with the FBI, or with David. The FBI technicians searched both his vehicle and his mom's SUV. Deputies also went to Chris's work and asked if he would mind coming to talk to them some more.
Mm-hmm.
So he agreed and drove to the police station. He also agreed to a polygraph and to a CVSA, which is a computerized voice stress analysis.
Oh, fancy. Wow.
And that is, both of them are basically tests to detect lies.
Right.
Overall, he insisted he didn't know where Rowan was, and he offered to help look for her. So, Wheaton, Missouri Chief of Police Clinton Clark was a longtime friend of Chris Collins. They'd known each other for about 17 years, and Chris would reach out to the older man for advice and insight when he needed it. Chief Clark was on routine patrol on Monday, November 5th, when Chris flagged him down and told him he was helping to look for Rowan Ford. Chris seemed kind of excited, quote-unquote, to the chief that day, not his normal self, and the chief went to the FBI after the encounter to let them know.
Interesting.
He believed that Chris knew something about Rowan's disappearance. So the FBI asked him to continue speaking with Chris, hoping that Chris would open up to him since they were good friends.
Right.
Meanwhile, Chris told the FBI that he thought David was somehow involved in Rowan's disappearance. He even offered to wear a wire and record their conversations and aid in the investigation. Chris also suggested different places where the FBI should look for Rowan. All 3 of the men, David, Chris, and Nathan, were considered persons of interest in the case since they'd been in the house with Rowan the night she went missing.
Mm-hmm.
Chris was considered cooperative, concerned, and polite. David, however, was the main focus of the investigation, having been interviewed several times and, like I said before,
Caught in lies
and not being completely open about where he'd been.
Mm-hmm.
On Tuesday, November 6th, Chief Clark met with Chris Collins again. Chris was acting nervous and wouldn't meet his eyes, which was unusual after a long and trusted friendship. Chief Clark believed that Chris had something on his mind, and the FBI believed that if Chris were to let anything slip, it would be to Chief Clark.
Mm-hmm.
They asked Chief Clark again to keep helping them, and he agreed. November 7th, Chris went to the Newton County Sheriff's Department to meet with the FBI. There, he gave a DNA swab and agreed to a search of his home and a safe that was still located at David's house from when he stayed at the family. While he was there, he also let the FBI know that David's alibi was not true. As the questioning continued, though, Chris became more nervous and emotional. Finally, he said if they didn't stop accusing him of being involved with Rowan going missing, then he wasn't answering any more questions. So he left the interview and he went to see Chief Clark. There, he told him about how upset he was and how he was going to refuse to speak with the FBI and he might even get a lawyer. Chief Clark told him he had the right to do that, of course, but he explained that it was in Chris's best interest to help them in any way he could to find Rowan.
Mm-hmm.
Chris told him if he had anything else to say, he would just come to the chief and say it to him. Since Chief Clark knew how important it was for proper procedure to be followed, he reviewed Chris's Miranda rights and gave him a waiver to sign so they could keep talking if Chris wanted to.
Wow.
So the chief told Chris that he felt like Chris had something on his mind and asked him if he knew anything about Rowan's disappearance. Chris began to cry and said he wouldn't have done anything to hurt her because he loved her. And it was at that point that someone interrupted their conversation and Chris slipped out of the room. I think they were at the chief's office at that point. So as was becoming routine, Chief Clark called the FBI and explained what had just happened. And he told him he was worried that Chris was at his breaking point, and rather than telling him whatever he knew, he was afraid he would end up getting a lawyer instead.
Mm-hmm.
So, on Thursday, November 8th, Chief Clark told the FBI that he thought Chris knew something about what happened to Rowan. He explained more about Chris's childhood, the trauma he went through in foster care, and about how he knew Chris and his family. He told the FBI that he didn't believe Chris would confess to what he knew until Rowan's body was found. The FBI told the chief that when they did find Rowan, they wanted Chief Clark to be the one to tell Chris. And all parties agreed it was the best chance they had to get Chris to talk.
Because he would be more honest, I guess.
Yeah.
If it was
they figured that if the chief went to him and said, hey, they found her, that Chris would tell them
the truth.
Actually
what happened. Okay.
So, same day, November 8th, Newton County Coroner Mark Bridges spent the day with David Spears, the stepfather.
The coroner did?
The coroner.
Interesting.
So, both David and Chris had worked for Mark's Bridges, the coroner, his automotive business in the past.
Okay.
Chris worked for him as a mechanic, and David worked as a mechanic and salesman. So Mark Bridges said he was on duty, I think in the coroner's office, on the day that Rowan had disappeared.
Okay.
And David called him that first day, when she was just missing and barely any time had passed. Mark didn't think it was that suspicious at the time because he had been the sheriff at one point, and he assumed that David had called him hoping he could help with the search for his stepdaughter. So, he said that David kept repeating, maybe she's at a friend's house. So when David called him, he was like, well, yeah, she had just gone missing. And yes, I'm the coroner, but I didn't think it was that big of a deal because he knew I had been the sheriff at one point. She was missing. He's thinking maybe she's at a friend's house, and he thought he was probably just calling thinking I could help search for her.
I mean, that makes sense. I get that.
Yeah. So, on November 8th, though, Mark was wired up, and the FBI had a plane following them overhead.
Oh,
Mark
wow.
had asked David to play devil's advocate and had suggested that he pretend like he, David, was Chris Collins. And he said, if you were Chris and you did something to Rowan, what would you do with her body? And Mark said that David thought for a minute, and Mark told him, okay, let's go look some places. The first place that David told him was Fox Cave. Fox Cave is actually a sinkhole that sits about 30 feet off the roadway and is known to locals. Mark Bridges said he saw some items nearby that made him suspicious, and he wanted to search the cave immediately. And he said that David wanted to search it too. He said he took me there for a reason. The next day was Friday, November 9th, 2007. It had been 1 week since Colleen left for her overnight shift, not knowing that her baby would go missing and she'd never see her alive again. Deputies Matt Hall and Jake Bowles went to Fox Cave to conduct a search around 8 a.m. There, 20 feet underground on a ledge, was the body of 9-year-old Rowan Ford. Okay, told you I would warn you. Take a deep breath. This is very brief. It describes her injuries and cause of death. If you don't want to hear, I timed it. It's about 20 to 30 seconds, so you can skip forward. Autopsy results confirmed what everyone feared. Rowan was murdered. She had been raped and strangled to death. She was wearing her pajama top and one sock, but no pants or underwear. Her body showed signs of decomposition, and there were small scrapes and bruises that had happened before her death. Her face had suffered significant injuries, likely caused by being thrown into the sinkhole. I'm just pausing a little bit in case anybody needed that time for their skip forward to catch up. So, Chief Clark heard the news about the discovery on TV. He also got a call from his office that Chris Collins had been there and was looking for him. The FBI urged him to reach out to Chris, but for a while the chief couldn't find him, and he didn't have to worry because Chris ended up calling him. Chris asked the chief if law enforcement was following him in a gray minivan, and the chief told him he didn't know. He wasn't aware of any surveillance. Chris said he felt threatened and had been driving around trying to shake them. Chief Clark told Chris to go to the police department, but Chris said that he wanted to meet up with the chief instead. Eventually, he agreed to meet the chief and go with him in his patrol car to the police station. At the police station a bit later, Chief Clark said one sentence to Chris that broke the case wide open. He said, "Well, son, it's over. We found Rowan's body this morning." Chris dropped his head and cried. Chief Clark then asked him to tell the truth. Chris didn't want to speak in front of the other officers, so Chief Clark told the officers where they would be and drove out to Muncie Bridge with Chris. When they got out of the car, Chris held out his arms waiting to be handcuffed. Chief Clark told him it wasn't necessary, but Chris said, "Once you hear what I have to tell you, it will be." Chris started telling the story of the night that Rowan was left alone in the house. Everything was exactly as the men had told it before, until they got to the part where Nathan drove David back home from Chris's trailer. That night, Nathan and David had planned on taking the back roads to avoid law enforcement. Chris knew they'd be avoiding the highway so they wouldn't get pulled over. All of them were inebriated, they were drunk and high, and they didn't want to get busted for driving under the influence. But Chris also knew that the highway was the fastest way to David's house. So Chris took the chance. So while Nathan and David winded their way through the back roads, Chris flew down the highway and got to David's house ahead of them. He let himself in and went to the bathroom. Then he went in Rowan's room and picked her up, where she had fallen asleep on her bedroom floor, and he carried her outside to his truck. She slept the whole way to his house. His plan was to take her home after he was done with her. He didn't speak because he knew she'd know his voice. Then, in the dark of the travel trailer he was living in, he raped her. When he was finished assaulting her, he forced her outside, naked from the waist down. He walked behind her, holding her arms by her side, trying to make her face forward so he could take her home. But in the moonlight, she turned her head and looked over her shoulder and saw his face. She recognized him. He had lived in the basement of her home until pretty recently. He had helped her with her homework. She referred to him as Uncle Chris. She not only knew him, she trusted him. Christopher Collins freaked out when she looked at him, he said. There was some rope in a truck on the property, so he got it and used it to strangle her to death. He knew he was in big trouble, so he put her body in the bed of his truck, not wrapped in anything, just laying in the bed of the truck. And at first he was going to dump her over Muncie Bridge, the place that he was sitting with Chief Clark when he was telling him this stuff. But he was afraid she'd be found too quickly. So he drove all over the county for a while and finally decided on the hole in the ground called Fox Cave. After throwing her inside, he tried to cover the opening with branches, but the opening's too wide and the branches kept falling in. So he kind of gave up on that and he went home. He had a little bit of blood on his clothes and on the mattress, and so it was time to start destroying evidence. So he took his clothes, the rope he'd used as the murder weapon, her pajama pants and underwear, and he put them in a wood stove to burn. He rolled up the mattress and put it in a large drum, but he worried that burning it out in the open would draw attention. So he left it stuffed inside the drum, but he put the mattress and the drum and stuff inside of a barn and set it on fire inside where the flames wouldn't be as obvious, and burned it in there.
Oh my gosh.
So after telling Chief Clark, Chris was taken back to the police station. There he was read his Miranda rights again, and he repeated his confession to Barry and Newton County deputies and FBI agents. He also consented to a search of his property. Next, he was taken to the Barry County Sheriff's Department, where he gave his statement a third time, this time while he was being video recorded. He told them he had cried all day and he was remorseful. The thing was, most of the deputies, officers, and agents involved in the case were surprised by his statement. They all believed that David had killed Rowan and that Chris had known something about it, but not that he was involved in it.
Right.
Anytime that Chief Clark talked to him, he thought he was
That he
encouraging
knew
him to tell them
what David had
what
done.
David had done. So, now that they had Chris's statement, they wanted to speak with David again. This time when they talked to David, he confessed to his part in the crime. He claimed that when Nathan dropped him off, he checked on Rowan and saw that she was gone. And he knew Chris had taken her and had her back at his house. And he said when he got to Chris's house, Chris was raping her. But rather than helping her, David said he raped her too. And then after he and Chris had both assaulted her, they knew they were both in big trouble. So they decided they'd have to kill her. So David said that Chris handed him the rope and then he, David, strangled Rowan with it. In his original interviews with the police, David said he'd been out just driving around that night. So now the cops realized that he had been out driving around, but not to kill time or because he couldn't sleep. He'd been out trying to figure out where to dump his stepdaughter's body.
In his mom's car.
And apparently.
Allegedly.
So, when investigators told Chris what David said, Chris insisted that it wasn't true. Chris said that Chris, had done the entire crime completely alone. He said that David had not participated in the crime itself or the aftermath, nor had he known anything about it.
What the heck is going on?
I'm sure that's exactly what the cops were asking, too. So, now the police had two men admitting to the crime, but one of them denying that the other one had anything to do with it. The police arrested both of the men on November 10th. The arrest affidavit said both men sexually assaulted Rowan, but it was unclear which one had actually killed her. Either way, they were both charged with the same felonies: statutory rape, forcible rape, and first-degree murder.
Mm-hmm.
Both were held without bond in Berry County Jail. David Spears spoke with his mother, Myrna, while in jail and told her he had taken part in the crime. He said he had blacked out and his memories had just started coming back. Chris's brother, Greg, said he couldn't believe Chris could do something so terrible. After all, Chris had 3 kids of his own. In my own words here, people do all kinds of sick and twisted and cruel things to their children, including this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Chris and his siblings had been in the foster system. They all had been in the foster system. And they know the kind of stuff that happens to kids in foster care. Like, they talked about Chris's traumatic childhood.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that he had kids of his own doesn't mean shit when it comes to whether or not he's capable of a crime against a child.
Right.
David had a kid, too, of his own. One that he did not see or support in any way. So, it has nothing to do with
you can't
whether
say,
or not
they have their own kids, so they would never.
I mean, and shit, maybe their biological children were lucky because they didn't see them.
Right.
Chris's kids lived in another state, so his kids are still alive, possibly because he lived in another state.
Right.
Anyway. So, Rowan's funeral was held on November 14th, 2007 at Gospel Lighthouse Church and was attended by over 300 people. Her favorite hymn, The Old Rugged Cross, was sung. On the morning of her funeral, her school planted a pink dogwood tree in her memory. An angel was placed next to it, engraved with her date of birth and the date on which her body was found. Because they don't technically know what her date of death was. Balloons were released into the sky with messages attached by her schoolmates. On November 27th, 18 days after her body was found and 13 days after her funeral, Rowan's mother, Colleen, filed for divorce from David Spears.
Good for her.
Yeah. Both David Spears and Christopher Collings pleaded not guilty to the charges against them, despite their confessions and their supposed feelings of remorse.
Oh my.
I know. That pisses
I don't
me
have
off.
words. I'm sorry.
On March 12th, 2012, so 5 years, it takes a while to put together a case like this.
Yeah.
Chris Collings' trial began for the murder of Rowan Ford. David Spears testified against him, and the videotape of Chris's confession, as well as the forensic evidence, was presented in his trial. Prosecuting attorneys were asking for the death penalty due to the horrendous circumstances of the case. I didn't dive into his court case because I honestly just don't care.
Don't give it. Yeah, same.
I'm like, you're disgusting and I don't want to read about all of that. On March 20th, 2012, he was found guilty of the murder. On March 23rd, 2012, after 48 minutes of deliberation, the jury came back with a death sentence for Christopher Collings.
Okay, then.
48 minutes.
Wow, that's got to be a record.
Yeah.
That's not even a whole hour, you guys.
Yeah. They were like, oh, let's think. Okay, yeah, he can die.
Wow.
And I feel for the people who cared about him, like his parents and people like that.
Yeah.
But for him, it's
like, I don't feel, yeah. Okay.
6 months later, on September 26, 2012, the charge of first-degree murder was dropped against David Spears. A plea agreement was reached where he would be sentenced to lesser charges. The charges were still felonies, but the maximum sentences were frickin' ridiculous compared to what he had admitted that he did. His plea deal gave him 4 years for hindering the prosecution for helping to cover up the crime. He got another 7 years for endangering the welfare of a child. The total prison time was 11 years. He was also credited for the time he'd already served. So he ended up serving a little over 7 years and was released on parole. The plea deal was arranged for a couple of reasons. First, Christopher Collings had always said that he committed the crime alone, and the forensic evidence said that Chris was involved. The same could not be said for David Spears. Second, the prosecution couldn't risk arguing that Chris Collings' statement was true, and then argue that David's statement was true when they contradicted each other in the ways that they did.
I get it.
If they had managed to get convictions for both men, they could have used the conflicting statements to get their convictions overturned on appeal.
Mm-hmm.
One or both could have been acquitted to begin with, or had the convictions overturned on appeal. The prosecuting attorneys had to basically weigh the risks and their options, and when it came down to it, Collings had confessed. His statement had remained consistent. He said he had done it completely on his own, and the evidence, the rape kit being part of that,
supported that he was
backed up his story.
Okay. I mean, I get it.
It isn't perfect.
You can't just be like, okay, well, he said that, so...
They couldn't risk both of them getting away with it,
right.
So they made an arrangement.
Right. I hate it, but I get it.
What sucks is that many people still have questions about how guilty David Spears is in this. People ask why he would confess to something so horrible if he didn't do it.
Yeah.
Because you have to remember, he didn't just tell the police that he raped his 9-year-old stepdaughter. He told his mother, while he was already in jail, that he did participate in the crime. That he had blacked out and his memories were coming back and that he had done it. Now, I guess you could say that he blacked out and then he started having memories and maybe they were dreams or nightmares. I don't know. Maybe you shouldn't have been drinking and smoking weed all night when you're supposed to be watching your 9-year-old stepdaughter, you know? Then you also got to wonder, why did you borrow your mom's car in the middle of the night, which was an SUV, while you were intoxicated? Did you want to just drive around?
Well, that was another thing. It's like, if you're...
And if you did, why not take your own vehicle? Because remember, they searched his truck and her car, so it's not like he just needed a car to drive somewhere.
He had his own car.
He had his own vehicle. And it's like, okay, did you want to use her car because then cops or whatever wouldn't recognize your plates? So, I'll use Mom's car. Or that way, because maybe Rowan's body was inside of her car, it wouldn't be as easy to see.
But you also got to think, this is a town of 200 people.
Yeah. Her car would probably be recognized too.
Everyone's going to know whose car is what.
Yeah. So...
if they saw anything.
Did he realize that Rowan was missing and he knew Chris had her, so when he went to Chris's house, maybe Chris was already looking for a place to dump the body and he just helped with the body dump? Or did he actually go and participate from the rape like he said?
Yeah, because, like, why would you admit to all of that if you truly did not?
Because it's like, I'm sorry, most people wouldn't admit to the rape part, even if they'd help dump the body.
Yeah.
Because in prison and stuff,
They know what's going to happen.
A child sex offender,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway, so a lot of people have questions. We'll likely never get the answers to it. He served a little over 7 years. He was released in 2015. While still on probation, he got hired by his trial attorney's husband as a secretary. The job? He worked for the Missouri State Public Defender's Office, and he was making around $40,000 a year.
Shut up. Just shut up right this second. And he doesn't have to
He was
say he's a sex
actually
offender either.
Apparently he worked for them. The timeline is weird because what I started reading made it seem like he got out of prison and started working there. But apparently he was working for the public defender's office before prison. And I'll go into that in a little bit later. For a second, I want to say this. I'm a pretty liberal person.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't tell by listening to these episodes. I really don't have a problem with people hiring former felons and people who have been convicted of crimes.
Right.
Because there's no way for you to change your life and get a step up if you can't get a job.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, I would be lying if I said it didn't make me feel a little bit sick. There are people who have committed less disgusting crimes, things that didn't involve the rape and the death of a child, that can't get a job because of their criminal history.
Mm-hmm.
And there are people who have committed crimes just so that they can pay their rent or buy groceries, and they manage to get a job where they're still just barely scraping by.
Right.
And this guy, freshly out of prison, or before he went to prison, whichever one it was, because again, the timeline's screwy, likely also freshly single, so he doesn't have to spend money on a woman, who confessed to raping and murdering his 9-year-old stepdaughter, whether he was convicted of it or not, who was in his care at the time, while he was drunk and high, so a drug user, can get a job with the state in a legal field, making $40,000 a year when he lives in a town of only 200 people.
That's crazy.
So you know the cost of living is a lot lower there.
Yeah.
And he's making one of the higher paying jobs there, I bet you anything.
He's like a millionaire there, practically, with all the money he's
Because
making.
that's a good paying job here.
Yeah.
In a town of 200,000 people.
Right.
That is one of the most triggering things we've had on this podcast for me.
Yeah.
That makes me ill.
It's, you have to have public defenders. We all know that. And
yes,
it's good, but it's kind of like.
But I'm like, why not a person who robbed a convenience store?
Yeah.
They could be a secretary at the public defender's office. Why a man who, even if you take out the stuff that he confessed to because he wasn't convicted of it, misdemeanor or whatever, welfare of a child.
Yeah.
That's one of the most vulnerable people in our communities. How can you trust a person like that?
Right. Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
And then pay him a shit ton of money.
And who thinks it's, like, who decided, you know what, this is a good idea.
Yeah.
We should have David work for us.
Yeah. And this case was a big deal in this area.
Well, especially in that small little town.
Yeah.
Even in the around.
And I'm like, so everybody knew who he was.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That doesn't make a single bit of sense.
So, around the date that Christopher Collings was set to be executed, the press began looking into where David Spears was and what he was doing. And that's when where people realized where he was working.
Oh.
Again, this throws off this timeline so much. I'm so confused.
Why is it so screwy? What the heck?
Because their trial was in 2012. He was released in 2015. Christopher Collings was set to be executed in 2024. So I'm like, how long did he work for them? Was this... I don't know. Anyway, the GOP in Missouri started fighting to get him fired
Mhm.
because it kind of made them sick too.
Yeah.
The way they did it was really shitty. They held the budget hostage for the public defender's office, basically. They refused to review it and approve it.
Unless he was
fired. Which, again, shitty.
Kinda
because
shitty.
a lot of people rely on the public defender's office, and that's not fair to the people who need them. And it would screw up, like, even just delaying it that much could really screw them up. But they got their way, and he was fired. And there were rules about, like, conflict of interest and stuff written into their hiring policies and stuff. And that's where some of the timeline thing confuses me, because Chris Collins' attorneys argued that part of the conflict of interest was related to the fact that Chris Collins wasn't offered a plea deal because David Spears was working for the public defender's office when Chris was on trial or something. It was something about that. Like, so they were worried that, like,
it wasn't offered to him because they already knew David and
they
like
gave him the plea deal or something. So I was confused about this. And if anybody listening to this knows this, or I don't know. So, because David's trial was 6 months later.
And then, of course, he
had his plea deal by that point. So, I'm really confused about the timelines and how that works out. But there was something about conflict of interest and the public defender's office and his plea deal. And how Chris didn't end up having an offer of a plea deal. But at the same time, Chris Collins wasn't offered a plea deal because, one, he confessed, two, there was actual physical evidence, too, for him.
Right.
So it was more likely that he was going to be convicted. And David Spears, even though he had made statements and confessed,
it's only a statement.
He didn't have any physical evidence to back up his part of the statement.
Right.
And it could be that there just didn't happen to be any evidence in the rape kit that he was there. But, so they kind of had to go with what they had. Or it could be that he lied and decided he just wanted to, I don't know.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I don't get it. Anyway.
Doesn't make
sense. So, he had his plea deal. Chris Collins didn't have a plea deal. So, in death penalty cases, appeals are automatic.
Mm-hmm.
Chris's attorneys had originally filed a motion to suppress his statements from November 9th, saying that they were coerced and that he didn't fully understand his Miranda warnings. The original court ruling threw that out, like denied that motion to suppress. The appellate court agreed with them. He was read his Miranda warnings several times, and he spoke with the officers repeatedly of his own free will.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So they were like, nah,
sense. What the hell?
Nah, you good.
Yeah.
His attorneys also claimed that law enforcement exploited his friendship with Wheaton Chief Clinton Clark, and that the chief used the, quote, false friend technique to eventually elicit a confession from Chris. They also said that Chris spoke with Chief Clark as a friend and not as a law enforcement professional. And this is based on a previous case where a man was coerced into providing a confession after a young officer he'd once known, like, in childhood, told him he'd get in trouble if he didn't get a confession from him, and then explained it would cause hardships for his wife and small children.
Okay, well, that's different.
Yeah. And so the appellate court denied that this was an exploitation, pointed out that Chris approached Chief Clark himself to speak about the case, and he did so regularly at Chief Clark's police station.
Right.
And contacted him on his work cell phone. He also told Chief Clark that if the FBI wanted to know anything else, that he would go to the chief instead.
Yeah.
So he was obviously speaking to him in a professional capacity.
And the chief had him sign the paper. And
he also talked to him about Miranda rights.
And the Miranda, yeah.
And as far as his confession, when the chief, like I said before, was talking to him about what he knew, He thought Chris was going to give him information about David Spears.
Right.
He was never coercing or trying to force him to confess to the crime.
Right.
He was trying to encourage him to tell him what he knew about what David Spears had done. So they basically were just like, nah, again.
You are right.
So, and as with all the other appeals, there's always several more points, but those were the two that I found most interesting. So, Chris Collins was executed on December 3rd, 2024. David Spears, as far as I know, is still walking around a free man. The only other thing I wanted to bring up, when I was looking into this case, and I, like an idiot, read comments.
Don't do that.
I know, I shouldn't ever do that. But I read comments, and people talked about, and actually in like one of the videos I watched, even like the new chief of police, Newton Chief Police or whatever, had said it changed the way they investigated child neglect cases and stuff like that. Okay, in the beginning I said that Rowan had matted hair, that she had lice sometimes, that she went to school without socks on. That she lived in a ramshackle house. People said that they should have taken her away. That CPS should have taken her away and this would never have happened to her. That they should have arrested her mom long before this. And like people were making all these comments about like Child Protective Services failed her long before they ever killed her and things like that. Now, the only thing that I ever saw as far as her neglect was, one, that night when those 3 grown freaking men were drinking and getting high and shooting pool while they were supposed to be watching a child.
Yeah.
And 2 were the lice and her going to school without socks on. Living in a, quote, ramshackle house. Now, the men, setting aside that, because that was just criminal, and those guys were obviously not responsible adults.
Right.
The thing with the ramshackle house is not everybody can live in a mansion.
Yeah.
And, you know, her mom's working at Walmart. The stepdad was working on a farm. I don't know what kind of job that was. Apparently, he was not working for the public defender's office making $40,000 a year at the time.
What the heck?
I don't know. So, I was kind of like, okay, well, kids get lice.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to pass it back and forth.
And never
it
really
sounds
get rid
like
of it.
to me that it wasn't really neglect. It was more like just a poor household.
Yeah.
They didn't have a lot of money. And it's like probably just didn't have a lot of anything.
Night, so during the day she's sleeping while Rowan's at school.
Yeah.
And then it's like Rowan gets
Or
home.
she probably works different shifts at different times.
Yeah.
Who knows? There was one thing where a teacher had said that she had one day that she noticed that Rowan needed to have her hair brushed. She like had to brush her hair. And so she brushed her hair for her and stuff. And it was like, but she said that like 30 minutes later she saw Rowan and she was just skipping by. She was just a really happy kid. And I'm like, I don't think that it was a matter of them like not caring about her. Like one person was talking about her mom's crocodile tears about her dead daughter. And I'm like, of course she's grieving her daughter. Even if she's just too tired and too worn out to do anything for her.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean she doesn't love her.
Right.
Rowan was the youngest of like 5 kids. I think the other kids were just older. And maybe out of the house or living with their dads or something maybe at that point. But I'm like, that doesn't mean she doesn't care.
Right.
I don't think that they were abusive toward her. Now, I don't know. That was the thing. I could not find. I looked up other articles. I Googled, like, signs of neglect, CPS. I looked for stuff. I could not find anything else that said that that CPS had ever investigated abuse or neglect allegations or anything about Rowan's childhood. And everybody talked about how she was the happiest kid, that she was a ray of sunshine, that she was whatever. to me, it seems like she lived in a household that didn't have a lot of income and that they did the best they could. And yeah, things weren't perfect, but she was a good kid and she was a happy kid and that she was just trying her best. And that so were her parents.
Mm-hmm.
And her mom had every right to grieve her child and be devastated by what happened.
Yeah.
Her dad was a shithole. His friends were worse shitholes. And she just, poor baby, was caught up in a situation that just should not have happened.
Yeah.
And somebody even said something about, and this pissed me off so freaking bad, something about her mom caring more about her sex life than her daughter.
Wow.
And I'm like,
how would they get to that?
I don't know.
Like
I'm like, why? Because her husband was home watching her daughter when she went to her work? I'm like, it's not like she had 3 Johns at her house or something.
Right.
Like, he was there. And what was she going to do? Tell him, don't have your friends over and drink? I've got to go to work? Like, she couldn't just not go to work. No, he shouldn't have been drinking. And yes, they were probably drinking when she left to go to work. But she couldn't just tell them, stop drinking. Don't have friends over. You're supposed to be watching our kid.
I mean, people
like
drink
she
with
has
their kids
to
there
go
all the time.
Yeah, she has to go to work. She couldn't just not go to work, and that was the only childcare she had.
Yeah, like,
and if she's working at Walmart
her?
And he's working on a farm and who knows how little money they make, she probably couldn't afford to call somebody and say, I'll pay you to babysit my daughter overnight.
Yeah, don't be so quick to automatically...
People are just so freaking judgy, and I'm like...
Yeah, judge the mom like that.
And it's like,
it's not always
she
the
obviously
mom's fault,
cared
guys.
about her daughter, and then less than a month later, she's filed for divorce.
Right.
She's like, you had a hand in my daughter dying. I don't want to be with you. Yeah. Obviously, she didn't choose him over her kid.
Stupid people.
It's like, this was her husband. What? She thought she could trust him.
Yeah, and had apparently no reason not to.
Yeah.
Like, what would she ever think that something like that would happen?
Yeah. How many nights had she worked overnight that he'd been at home and
everything was fine?
And she came home the next day. It was her routine that she came home and Rowan would come out and
meet her. Yeah.
Like, so I just had to throw that in there. That pisses me off. I didn't see any other signs. Maybe there were some. Maybe mom and stepdad were shitty parents and they beat her regularly. I have no idea, but I could not find anything else about that. And I just wanted to say, if you read up on this case at all and you see that, just take it with a grain of salt, because I didn't find anything else on it, and I think it's bull that they started that. I think that was judgment, and I think that was people looking down on other poor people.
Right.
Because they didn't say taken from her house, taken from her bedroom, it was her ramshackle house. She lived in a ramshackle house. She had matted hair, lice, blah. They always started out the story with that. And I'm like, why? Because she was poor? I mean, we didn't have a ton of money, but we were clean. And yeah, we got lice sometimes.
Yeah, it happens.
Because kids do that.
Yeah.
They share brushes. They share, hair things. Yeah. That happens. And, those little kits that you buy at the CVS, they're probably pretty expensive to get rid of lice, too.
They're not cheap.
And you have to be there, and you have to keep treating it.
In your house.
In your house. And all your stuffed animals, and all your bedclothes, and your carpets. And you know what? It must not have been too bad. She had a Barbie pink bedroom and a bike. Thank you very much. Anyway, Rowan would have been 27 this past April if she had lived.
Oh my gosh.
And she was in school. She was trying to make the best life she could have. I think she would have been.
She was doing great.
Yeah, I think she would have been a good kid, and hopefully she would have made it out of that tiny, tiny town and made a life for herself. I hope she's at peace. I hope her mom's at peace. I hope her mom has found a way to get some kind of peace, and her siblings, because her siblings were devastated.
Well, and all the kids she went to school with, and her friends, and her teachers, and just everyone that knew her.
She had a big smile. She kind of reminded me of me. She had a little bit of a crooked tooth thingy at the front there, and she had just Just a big 9-year-old grin, like she was going to be kind of an awkward stage pretty soon, with her, growing into the teen years, I think. And she was, poor little thing. She did not deserve that crap. Nobody does, but that's just, that was brutal and just sick. And I hate both of those men because I don't know what David did, but he sure as hell didn't stop it.
It sounds like he may have at least known something.
And he should not have been drinking. And if he had stayed home like he was supposed to and kept with his daughter instead of getting drunk and going with them.
Especially a 9-year-old.
Yeah. When Nathan took Chris home, David should have been like, I can't go with you.
Yeah.
Number one, we're all drunk off our asses. Yeah. And two, I have to stay here. She's my responsibility. I have to stay here.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was a sad case, and I'm sorry to do that to you, but at least I made myself angry at the end, so it's a little easier to tolerate. Yeah, so it's
a little bit easier, so we can deal with the sadness.
Yeah.
And the anger.
So let us know what you think if you want. You can email us at triggerwarning411@gmail.com. If you pray, say a little prayer for Rowan.
And her family.
Think of her family. Hold your little ones.
Or if they're big ones.
Or your big ones, yeah.
Just hold them.
Give them Barbie pink bedrooms if they want it.
Purple bikes.
Yeah. Make them happy.
Tell them you love them.
They're only 9 once.
Yeah.
And if they act like little crazy people, let them be little crazy people, because that's okay. They deserve the opportunities. So, that's all I've got for us today.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing the story. It was a very sad one.
She deserves to be remembered.
She sounds like she was an amazing little girl.
She was. To be that happy in the face of all that, being in a ramshackle house. Just pisses me off so bad. No. But anyway, I think she had just such
potential.
She had a lot of potential because that attitude, I think, would have taken her a long way.
She had a light inside of her, yes. It sounds like. Like she was just a light to other people. Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing.
Little ray of sunshine, little girl.
So let's just remember the good things about her.
Yes.
And not the sad things that happened.
Yes.
And the anger.
I'm going to find some happy music to trail out of here instead of sad music.
I like that. That's a good idea.
In honor of Rowan.
So enjoy this happy music, you guys.
Yes. We didn't start out our podcast with our usual thing, but I guess we'll end it with our usual thing, though. Because everybody still needs the warning, so.
Right. So, guys, don't forget, watch for deer.